Welcome back to our channel. In the dim light of the conference room, the air between Anita and Vernon crackled with unspoken tension. They had agreed, somewhat reluctantly, to meet Andre that afternoon because the ledger of debts and half-truths between them could no longer be ignored. Vernon's jaw was set, his fingers drummed lightly on the polished mahogany table. Anita stood just behind him, arms crossed, the blade of her frustration hidden well beneath her composed exterior. Andre arrived late, deliberately so, forcing Vernon to stew in silence, forced to watch the door, aware from the moment he walked in that he was no longer the confident patriarch of this household, he was prey. As Andre laid down the file of documents, a sealed envelope, an unauthorized wire transfer, and a confession of sorts, Vernon's pulse spiked. The accusations were precise, surgical: embezzlement, misdirection of funds, family trust misused. Each line a dagger to his reputation. Anita's eyes blazed with disappointment. She had built her life believing in Vernon's leadership, but now she found herself wondering how long the deception had been pulsing beneath their gilded lifestyle. Andre's voice was calm, but the calm was a trap. He reminded Vernon of every secret meeting, every off-books transaction, every whispered promise that he now held in his hands. Vernon's mind raced. His motives had been justified, he told himself: preserving the family legacy, protecting the company from prying eyes. Yet standing there, with the evidence exposed, he felt naked. Shame and fury mingled in his chest. He glanced at Anita, searching for solidarity, but found only her cold, distant gaze. She stood poised, like a re-evaluated investment, assessing Vernon's worth. He realized she was no longer on his side. Elsewhere, Danny paced in front of the vanity mirror, surrounded by lights and reflectors. The moment of her major photoshoot had arrived, a launch that would define her future. All eyes would be on her, but the glamour felt like a cage. Her stomach churned as she adjusted the collar of her dress, rehearsing the smile. Inside her mind stormed confusion and ambition in equal measure. She wanted to be seen, celebrated, powerful, but she also feared the cost. If she failed, the family would recoil; if she succeeded, she would stir envy and suspicion. She glanced at her phone and saw a message from Andre: "We need to talk after." Her pulse thudded. She knew of the secret meeting with her father, the under-table agreements swirling. Her role felt compromised. And yet she had to appear flawless. Each flash of the camera would feel like a spotlight on her greatest vulnerability. Her breath quickened. The pressure was real. She thought, this image means everything: if I fall, everyone loses. Meanwhile, Ted and Leslie circled each other like predators. Their conflict wasn't loud, but it was ruthless. Both fathers, if that is what they now were, claimed a piece of Danny's life. Both desired to shape her path, but for very different reasons. Ted wanted control, the clean, strategic path, the picture-perfect family. Leslie wanted authenticity, vulnerability, truth, a chance for their daughter to break free. But that clash turned toxic. Ted began pulling strings, scheduling meetings, whispering to Danny when Leslie wasn't around, "You don't know what you're doing." Leslie retaliated by undermining Ted's email drafts and leaving voicemails loaded with guilt and expectation. Doubt blossomed in Danny's mind. She found herself caught in the crossfire, forced to choose, and as she looked at herself in the mirror, the smile felt like a mask. The anxiety coiled in her gut like steel wire. Derek stood at the threshold of a different kind of collapse. He had leaned on Shanice to untangle a web of trouble he'd spun. A failed contract, a blunder with the accounts, a dangerous credulousness to the colleague who offered a shortcut. Shanice had helped him straighten edges, cover tracks, soothe the fallout, because Derek knew her too well, and she owed him. But now Shanice's loyalty hung by a thread. She sensed the tipping point. She'd been tired of being second best. She'd helped him out of obligation, but she didn't owe him forever. When Derek saw her watching him from the hall, the calculation in her eyes unreadable, he realized for the first time that the indebtedness might turn into a weapon. He felt betrayed before any act had occurred. The dread of the hammer coming down kept him sweating in sleepless nights. Ashley, ambitious and restless, leaned quietly on Naomi. Naomi was her ally, her confidant, her ladder. Together they planned Ashley's ascent: new project, new title, new recognition. But Naomi wasn't naive. She knew the sacrifices involved, the alliances broken, the backs turned. Ashley's dependence unsettled her because every favor owed carries a ledger. Naomi began to shift, not overtly, but in small glances, in withheld texts. Ashley sensed the friction. The partnership once warm grew strained, the promise of victory felt tainted by an undercurrent of distrust. Ashley felt herself teetering. She needed Naomi's help, but she feared that Naomi might hold the key to her fall. The dread of betrayal simmered in the background like bad wine. Back in the larger picture, the moment of reckoning for Danny and Andre drew near. They knew that within the next 24 hours they would have to decide, stay in the safety of the known, tied to family, wealth, obligations, or step into the unknown together, risking everything. In the quiet of the night, they sat across the table in a private dining room, the glow of a solitary bulb casting long shadows. Andre's hand hovered over the documents. Danny's eyes flicked to her father's house beyond the window, the empire she both loved and loathed. They knew the stakes. If they chose the unknown, they might face ostracization, financial ruin, or worse, exposure of all their secrets. If they stayed, they chained themselves to a legacy built on lies. Danny's hands trembled. Andre's jaw tightened. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Vernon's looming threat, the family's internal warfare, the whisper network of loyalties and betrayals, everything pressed down on them. Nicole's unexpected intervention shifted the dynamics again. She appeared at Andre's doorstep that evening, offering to help. The gesture was generous on the surface. But in her tone was a warning: if you accept this, you don't get to choose the terms. There will be consequences. Nicole had her reasons: old affection, strategic positioning, resentment of Vernon's dominance. She said nothing of her plan, only signaled the severity. Andre understood. She held cards no one else knew about. The alliance made him uneasy, yet desperate. He glanced at Danny and thought about what this meant for their future. Nicole's help was both a lifeline and a shackle. Kat and Smitty's collision added further electricity to the situation. Kat, once the quiet background note, had grown bold. Smitty, comfortable in his established role, now found her crossing boundaries. They met in the staff kitchen, quiet, too casual, but the tension crackled. Kat questioned Smitty's loyalties. Smitty retaliated with sarcasm, reminding her she was the new girl sweet-talking her way up. Kat's patience snapped. Smitty's smirk faltered. In that moment, plates clinked, eyes locked. The unresolved resentment hung between them like charged wires. Neither backed down. The workplace battlefield manifested personal stakes, aggression disguised as professionalism. And Derek, once confident, found himself pulled deeper into an illicit connection with a new colleague, someone charismatic, dangerous, enticing. The late-night meetings, the whispered promises, the lines crossed. He told himself it was just strategy. But the more he slipped, the more he felt the trap closing. He knew Shanice could spot him slipping, she might expose him. He knew Naomi might trade the information. He knew that any misstep could ignite the powder keg that Vernon's documents represented. He was cornered. The walls were closing in. Hours passed. Vernon awoke from a half-sleep on the couch, haunted by dreams of documents shredding themselves, of whispers in hallways, of Anita's silhouette walking away. He realized his story was unraveling, and that the man he'd carefully crafted in the public eye might vanish within days. Fear consumed him, but anger flared too, because he believed he deserved respect, loyalty, family unity. Instead he faced contempt, evidences and alliances shifting against him. He felt the ground give way beneath his feet. The empire he built threatened to crush him. Anita, having left the meeting with Andre, walked down the corridor alone. The echo of her heels on marble floor seemed loud in her ears. She pressed a hand to her temple. She felt betrayal worse than any financial loss, a betrayal of self, of ideals she once held. The rage inside her was cold and calculated. She realized she had to decide: stand by Vernon because she once loved the man and shared his vision, or walk away and reclaim her own power. The anger at herself for remaining silent so long, the fury at him for lying so badly, the fear of what ripple effects the secrets would create, everything surged. She clenched her fists. She would no longer be collateral damage. Dani, dressed and ready for the shoot, stepped onto the set, the lights blinding her for a moment. The creative director shouted action, and the camera clicked. But her mind was elsewhere. She saw her father's face in her mind, Andre's uncertain eyes, Nicole's subtle warning. She felt the duel between Ted and Leslie like a force field around her. She had promised herself she would shine, break free, yet she realized that in doing so she might destroy the very family that propped her up. Her body stilled, for a heartbeat she allowed the facade to crack. The photographer shouted again. Dani forced a laugh, flipped her hair. The image was perfect, but the woman inside felt fractured. Ted and Leslie stood on opposite balconies of the house that evening, each nursing a drink. Ted's expression was steely, he believed he was doing what was right. Leslie's shoulders slumped, weary from the fight. But neither relented. Each believed the daughter needed them, and each believed the other was the obstacle. They were no longer fathers concerned for their child. They were warriors locked in combat. The lines had blurred, love masked as control, care disguised as undermining. Beneath the surface, resentment had fermented. Derek lied awake in a hotel room, lights off, the city skyline glowing beyond the window. His phone vibrated. It was Shanice. The message, "We need to talk." He froze. He'd outrun so many alarms, financial red flags, risk of exposure, the trembling loyalty of partners, but this felt final. The relationship with the new colleague tugged at him like a noose. He thought of Naomi and Ashley, they were playing an entirely different game of ambition, but still the same board. He thought of Dani and Andre, about decisions and betrayals. He thought of his father's legacy, of being valued for being the son-in-law, the trusted lieutenant. Now he felt worthless. Fear and anger boiled anger at himself for being weak, for letting the web spin. Fear that every thread he depended on would snap. Ashley sat in her sleek new corner office, the city lights behind her. Naomi's goodbye email pinged a short message, "Good luck." No flourishes, no thank you. Ashley stared at the screen. She realized she was alone. She could feel the ambition coursing through her veins, but it had turned cold. The ascent she'd planned now felt hollow. The ally she counted on was slipping away. Betrayal felt imminent. She clenched the edge of the desk, bones creaking in protest. She thought, I did this, I built this, why do I feel powerless? As dawn approached, the family house lay quieter than usual. But for each person inside, the war raged on, unseen. Versus lines were drawn. Loyalty had become currency. Secrets were explosives. Decisions had consequences. And no one knew how much longer they could hold the facade. In one final convergence, at the Grand Estates Library, Vernon confronted Anita. The file from Andre sat on the table between them. His voice was low, loaded with hurt. Anita's was firm, unyielding. She asked questions he couldn't answer, about the wires, the offshore account, the hidden meetings. Vernon flushed and then paled. For the first time, he tasted panic. Anita raised her chin, the anger in her eyes more terrifying than any words. You have one chance to tell me the truth. Not for your sake, but for what this family will become. In that moment, Vernon understood, the ground had shifted. He could deny, deflect, or confess, but neither option guaranteed safety. He was boxed in. His empire might collapse because of what he did, but worse, he might lose the person he thought he ruled beside. And Anita knew that he feared losing her more than losing the company. At the same hour, Dani and Andre handed in their decision form. They chose to walk away from the legacy and step into a world where they owed no one. They trembled as they signed. They saw the shocked looks on Ted and Leslie's faces. They tasted freedom, but also terror. Late that night, Andre sat in his car, engine idling, rain tapping the roof, and thought, the ledger he had with him, Nicole's file, the alliance is shifting, this was no longer a discussion. It was survival. The next morning, Ashley stood in the hallway, watching Naomi pass by. She reached out, and Naomi didn't look back. Derek got a call, we're done. Shanice's voice crisp. He realized the last support had walked away. Smitty arrived at work and found Kat waiting. She held a USB drive. "Your move." She said nothing more. Smitty stared at her, mouth dry. The war had arrived at workplace corridors. And so the narrative spiraled into one place: betrayal, ambition, legacy, and choices. Every character trapped by their desires and fears. The more they tried to escape the maze, the more the walls closed in. Because when secrets weigh as heavily as power, and family ties are built on shifting sand, there is no redemption easily earned and no reconciliation without destruction. In the decades to come, each would look back at this week and know, it wasn't the whispers, not the documents, not the deals, it was the moment when they chose. The moment when patience ended, where tricks became truths, and where love mutated into leverage. And they would realize how differently things might have unfolded had